My name is Naomi Carter, and I'm 29 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed that stability wasn't something you settled for. It was something you built. Carefully, intentionally, brick by brick. I never needed chaos to feel alive. I didn't crave surprises or last-minute plans or nights that ended with regrets. What I wanted was consistency, the kind that lets you exhale. I thought I had that with James. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 6 months. Our life wasn't flashy, but it was ours. Sunday brunch at the same corner cafe where the waitress knew our order. Netflix nights stretched across the couch, legs tangled, some documentary we'd half watch while talking about our week. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, arguing over which tomatoes were actually worth the price. Was it exciting? Maybe not in the way people post online, but it was steady, and I loved it. James was 27, thoughtful in that quiet way that doesn't need to announce itself. He liked predictability as much as I did, or at least I thought he did. We had routines that felt earned, a rhythm that came from choosing each other, day after day, without needing constant reinforcement. 6 months earlier, he'd proposed. Nothing over the top, no crowd, just us, a simple ring, and a promise that felt solid in my chest. We started planning the wedding immediately. Venue booked, deposits paid, dates saved, our future felt handled, locked in. I was happy, secure in a way that didn't need proving. Then one of James's closest friends from college moved back into town. He called her his best friend. She made sure everyone else did too. Single, fresh off yet another breakup, loud about it. The kind of woman who framed every failed relationship as proof that commitment was a trap and freedom meant never answering to anyone. At first, I didn't think much of it. James deserved time with his friends. I wasn't threatened by her history or her opinions. We trusted each other, or at least I trusted him. When he started going out more, I told myself it was normal. Reconnecting. Catching up. But slowly things shifted. He started staying out later, texting more, smiling at his phone in a way I hadn't seen before. Not secretive exactly, just distracted. There were more nights labeled guys' night, more spontaneous plans that didn't include me. He talked about bars downtown, places he'd never wanted to go before, about doing more while we're still young. Once I suggested we go together. He laughed softly and said, "You'd hate it, babe. Too loud, too crowded. You know you." That sentence stuck with me. Not because it was cruel, but because it wasn't entirely him. It felt rehearsed, like an idea he'd borrowed, a version of me that made sense for a story I hadn't agreed to be part of. I didn't push, I didn't accuse, I didn't demand explanations. I told myself relationships evolve, people change. This was just a phase. I had no idea that somewhere, behind a closed door, my entire life was already being rewritten. If I'm being honest, there was nothing dramatic about the moment I realized she was a problem. No confrontation, no warning bells, no instinctive jealousy. It crept in quietly, the way most real fractures do, disguised as normal change. James had always had friends. I never questioned that. Before her return, his social life was balanced, predictable. A drink after work once in a while. A game night. Dinner with friends where I was always invited, always included. Nothing felt hidden. That changed after she came back. She'd been one of James's closest friends from college, someone he described as having been through a lot. That phrase came up often. It was always followed by an explanation. Another breakup, another disappointment, another story where the man was the villain and she was the misunderstood victim who just wanted to live. Single, recently dumped, again. She had a way of making her heartbreak everyone else's responsibility. At first, James framed it as catching up, helping a friend get back on her feet. I didn't object. I even encouraged it. Being there for people you care about matters. I believed that. But slowly, her presence stopped being occasional and started becoming constant. James began going out on Thursday nights, something he'd never done consistently before. He called them guys' nights, said it was just drinks, nothing crazy. Sometimes he came home late, smelling like alcohol in loud places. Other times, he wouldn't come home at all until after midnight. I told myself not to read into it. Then Sundays changed. Sunday had always been ours. Brunch, errands, an easy afternoon that bled into evening without effort. Suddenly, he had plans. Catching up. Just a quick thing. You wouldn't be into it. Each time he said that, he smiled, like he was trying to soften the blow. I smiled back, or at least I tried. The real shift wasn't in his schedule, it was in his language. He started using words that didn't sound like him, talking about being too young to settle into routines, about how people waste their 20s playing it safe. Once, half joking, he said, "We're basically living like we're 40." I laughed, but it didn't land right. Because he'd never said that before, I noticed the way he'd check his phone more often, the way notifications made him smile, not big, not obvious, just a quick lift at the corner of his mouth. The way he'd angle the screen away without realizing it. Not hiding exactly, just prioritizing. I didn't confront him, not yet. I watched. I listened. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a thought formed that I didn't want to give shape to. She wasn't just venting about her life. She was narrating his. And he was starting to believe her. Stop. Chi tiết friend bị lặp lại. Đúng, bà bắt rất chuẩn. Trong part 2, chi tiết về friend bị nhắc lấp vai trò và tính chất. Closest friend get cheo, best friend get cheo, single get cheo breakup. Hơi nhiều lần, làm giảm lực kê. Dưới đây là part 2, clean version đã. Cat, các đoạn lặp. Giữ đúng mạch cảm xúc, không thêm tình tiết mới. Không làm ngắn quá mức, giữ logic joy và không same gender romance. Part 2, the friend who never stayed. If I'm being honest, there was nothing dramatic about the moment I realized she was a problem. No confrontation, no warning bells, no sudden jealousy. It crept in quietly, the way real fractures usually do, disguised as normal change. James had always had friends. That was never an issue. Before she came back, his social life felt balanced and open. A drink after work once in a while. The occasional game night. Group dinners, where I was always included. Nothing secretive. Nothing that made me feel pushed to the side. That shifted after one of his closest friends from college moved back into town. She was single, recently out of yet another breakup, and she had a way of turning every conversation into a referendum on why relationships failed and why settling down was a mistake people made too early. James said she'd been through a lot. He said she just needed support. I believed him. At first, it looked harmless. Catching up, helping a friend get back on her feet. I didn't object. I even encouraged it. Supporting the people you care about matters, or at least that's what I'd always believed. But her presence stopped being occasional and started becoming constant. Thursday nights appeared on James's calendar out of nowhere. He called them guys' nights, said it was nothing serious, just drinks. Sometimes he came home late, smelling like alcohol in loud places. Other times, he didn't come home until well after midnight. I told myself not to read into it. Then Sundays changed. Sunday had always been ours. Brunch, errands, an unspoken agreement that the day belonged to us. Suddenly, he had plans. Just catching up. It won't take long. You wouldn't really be into it. Each time he said that, he smiled like he was trying to make it sound gentle. I smiled back, or tried to. What unsettled me wasn't the time he spent away, it was the language he started using. He talked about being too young to get stuck in routines, about how people waste their 20s playing it safe. Once, half laughing, he said, "We're basically living like we're 40. That comment stayed with me, because he'd never talked like that before. I noticed the way he checked his phone more often, the way notifications pulled his attention away mid-conversation, the way his smile showed up faster when the screen lit up than when I walked into the room. I didn't accuse him. I didn't confront him. I watched. I listened. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a thought began to form, one I didn't want to name yet. She wasn't just talking about her life. She was shaping his view of mine. And little by little, he was letting her. I came home early that night, not for any particular reason. A meeting wrapped up faster than expected. Traffic was light. One of those small, unremarkable changes in a day that should have meant nothing. It ended up meaning everything. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the lights were on in our living room. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the noise. Laughter, loud enough to spill through the walls. The kind of laughter that came in waves. Unfiltered, careless. The kind people only use when they're sure they're among allies. I assumed James had friends over. Another night out that had spilled back to our place. I grabbed my bag, walked up the stairs, and reached for the door. That's when I heard her voice. Clear, confident, familiar by now. "Come on," she said, dragging the words out. "You're 27. You're about to lock yourself down forever with the same routine, the same weekends, the same safe little life." Someone else laughed. Another voice chimed in, amused. No offense, but you guys basically live like a retired couple. More laughter. I froze with my hand still on the door handle. Inside, I could hear glasses clinking, the low hum of music, the casual comfort of people who believed they were speaking freely. She kept going. When was the last time you did something spontaneous? She asked. Like actually spontaneous. Not brunch, not errands, not another quiet night in. A pause. Then James laughed. Not awkwardly, not nervously. A real laugh. She's not wrong, he said. I mean, I am pretty predictable. My chest tightened, sharp and sudden. Someone added, predictable isn't always bad, but still, you're too young to be this boring. There it was. The word hung in the air like it belonged there. And then she said it, the line that would replay in my head for weeks. You should have some fun without her, she said lightly. Go out, dance, flirt a little. Remember you're still hot. I waited. I don't know what I was waiting for. A defense, a joke that shut it down, a reminder that he loved me, that our life wasn't something to apologize for. Instead, I heard him say almost casually, maybe you're right. More laughter. I stood there, motionless, for what felt like a long time. Long enough for the words to settle. Long enough for the picture they were painting to become clear. I didn't open the door. I didn't interrupt. I turned around, walked back down the stairs, and got into my car. I sat there with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. The woman I was planning to build a life with had just agreed, out loud, that our life was boring, that I was boring, that he needed to find fun somewhere else. I drove for almost 2 hours. No destination, just movement. I picked up food I didn't taste, let the radio play without hearing it, tried to convince myself that I'd misunderstood, that it was just exaggerated talk, alcohol and bravado and nothing more. When I finally came home, the apartment was quiet. James was in pajamas, stretched out on the couch, watching TV like nothing had happened. Hey, he said easily. How was your night? Fine, I replied. How was work? Same as always. He smiled. Just hung out with some friends. Drank a little. Talked nonsense. Nonsense. I went to bed without saying anything else. He didn't notice. The days after that night passed in a way that felt almost unreal. Nothing exploded. There were no arguments, no accusations hurled across the room. James didn't suddenly turn cold or distant in any obvious way. If anything, he seemed normal. Too normal. Like the man I'd always known, just slightly out of sync. And that was what made it worse. I watched him more closely after that. Not in a suspicious way. No checking phones, no interrogations, but with a quiet awareness that something fundamental had shifted. Once you hear the way someone talks about you when they think you're not listening, you can't unhear it. He was on his phone constantly, not glued to it, but attentive. Quick glances, half smiles, a lightness in his expression that faded when he noticed me watching. He started making plans without me as a default. Thursday night, I'm heading out, he'd say casually, already grabbing his keys. With who? I asked once. Just some friends. That phrase became a catch-all, a way to avoid specifics, a way to end the conversation before it began. I didn't fight it. I didn't demand details. Part of me didn't want to confirm what I already suspected. Another part of me was stubbornly hopeful that this would burn itself out, that he'd realize what he was risking. Instead, the distance grew. He talked more about places he'd never cared about before. Clubs downtown, bars that stayed open too late, a possible weekend in Vegas for his bachelor party, something big, something memorable. You'll come too? I asked once lightly. He laughed, not unkindly. No, babe, just the guys. There it was again, that invisible line being drawn. Another night, he mentioned wanting to try a new place in the city. Loud, trendy, packed. When I suggested we make a night of it together, he shook his head. You wouldn't like it, he said. Too crowded, too much noise. You know you. You know you. I wondered when he had stopped knowing me. That sentence echoed louder than he probably intended. It wasn't cruel. It was efficient. A neat way of boxing me into a version of myself that made his choices easier to justify. In his version of the story, I wasn't being left behind. I was opting out. I noticed the way he'd grown impatient with our routines. The things that had once felt comforting now seemed to irritate him. Movie nights cut short. Dinners rushed. Conversations half finished because his phone buzzed. Once, I caught a glimpse of a text preview on his screen. Just a few words before he tilted it away. You're still young. Don't forget that. My stomach dropped. I didn't ask who sent it. I didn't need to. That night, lying next to him in bed, listening to his breathing even out as he fell asleep. I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the quiet unraveling happening beside me. This wasn't infidelity, not in the obvious sense. It was something subtler. A slow rewriting. A story where I wasn't the partner he'd chosen, but the limitation he'd outgrown. And the worst part? He didn't seem to realize how far he'd already gone. I decided not to wait any longer. Silence had given me clarity, but it hadn't given me peace. Watching someone slowly drift while pretending nothing was wrong was its own kind of cruelty. If our life was being questioned, I wanted it out in the open, where it belonged. So that Friday night, I made a reservation. An Italian place he'd mentioned months earlier and never followed up on. Good food, dim lights, quiet enough to talk without shouting over music. The kind of place that felt familiar, safe. When I told James about it, his face lit up, just a little, enough to remind me why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. Dinner started easily. Wine, small talk, updates about work. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined everything. If I'd let one overheard conversation spiral into something bigger than it was. Then, halfway through the second glass of wine, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "So," he said, casual, almost excited, "the guys are thinking about doing something big for my bachelor party." I nodded. "Like what?" "Vegas, 3 nights, clubs, bottle service. One of my friends found a package deal." There it was again, Vegas, youth, escape. "Sounds expensive," I said carefully. He shrugged. "Yeah, but we're only young once, you know? YOLO. I looked at him for a long moment. He'd never said that before, not once in 4 years. "Your friends have really been getting in your head lately," I said lightly, testing the ground. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "It just feels like you're not that happy with our life anymore." "That's not true," he said quickly. "I love our life." "Do you?" He hesitated just for a second. "Because I overheard you," I continued, keeping my voice steady, "the other night, when I came home early." The color drained from his face. "You heard that?" "Enough." The clinking of silverware around us suddenly felt too loud. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Babe, that wasn't serious. We were just joking. You know how it is. Just talk. Was it a joke when you agreed that you should have fun without me?" He reached across the table for my hand. I pulled mine back. "They were being dramatic," he said. "I was tipsy. You know how my friend gets." "And you went right along with it." The waiter appeared, asking about dessert. We both shook our heads at the same time. When he left, James tried again. "Relationships need honesty, right?" he said. "Maybe we are a little settled. Maybe we could go out more, be more spontaneous." I nodded slowly. "Is that what you want?" He smiled, hopeful. "Yeah, sometimes." I took a breath. "Okay," I said. "Here's some spontaneity for you." His face brightened. "Really?" "You think I'm boring," I continued. "You think our life is boring, and you need to find fun without me." The smile faded. "So," I said calmly, "go find it, as a single man." He stared at me. "What?" "I'm ending the engagement." "You're serious?" His voice cracked. "Over one comment?" "Over the way you said it," I replied. "Over the way you agreed. Over the fact that you let your friends define our relationship while I was standing right there." "That's insane," he said. "I love you. I want to marry you." "You want to marry boring, predictable me?" I asked. "The version of me you've been apologizing for?" He didn't answer. I stood up and reached for my coat. "I'm paying the bill." "This is ridiculous," he said, panic creeping into his voice. "We can talk about this." We just did. I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing. By the time I got home that night, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Missed calls stacked on top of each other. Texts coming in faster than I could read them. James's name flashing again and again, like if he repeated it enough, I'd change my mind. I didn't answer. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a long moment, keys still in my hand, listening to the familiar hum of the apartment. For the first time since everything unraveled, the space felt exposed, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. James and I lived together. The lease was in my name. The furniture was mine. He'd moved in gradually over time until it felt permanent without ever being official. After leaving the restaurant, I hadn't gone straight back. Not because it wasn't my place, but because I didn't want a confrontation while emotions were still raw. I stayed at a friend's place that night, deliberately. I needed space, time to think. A few quiet hours without explanations or apologies knocking at my door. By morning, the apologies started. "I didn't mean it like that. You took it the wrong way." They were joking. "Please call me." I read every message. I didn't respond. Around midday, the tone shifted. "You're really going to throw away 4 years over this? This is extreme. You're overreacting. By evening, it tipped into anger. I can't believe you'd do this to me. My friends think you're being unfair. This isn't who you are. I replied once. You're free now. Have all the fun you want. Then I muted the thread. Saturday morning, I woke up to a new message. I'm at the apartment. We need to talk. My stomach tightened. I texted back immediately. You need to leave. I live there, he replied. Your name isn't on the lease, I wrote back. We're done. You need to pack your things. He called. I didn't answer. Then my phone rang again, from a different number. One of his friends. I ignored that too. That afternoon, I went back to the apartment with a friend. Not because I was afraid, but because I refused to walk into a confrontation alone. When I opened the door, James was there, along with the same friend who'd been loudest the night I overheard everything, and another guy I barely recognized. She didn't bother easing into it. This is so messed up, she said, arms crossed. You're kicking him out over a joke. I wasn't asking for your opinion, I said calmly. James stepped forward. Naomi, can we just talk alone? We already did, I replied. You have until Thursday to get your things. That's 3 days, his friend snapped. Plenty of time, I said, between all the fun plans. She rolled her eyes. You're being petty. This is financial abuse. I laughed, once. Financial abuse? I repeated. He doesn't pay rent. His name isn't on the lease. Being engaged doesn't entitle him to live here. James's face fell. Please, he said quietly, don't do this. I didn't, I answered. You did. Someone asked where he was supposed to go. Not my problem, I said. Maybe your couch. You seem invested. That ended the conversation. As I walked out, I heard them calling me names. Cold, controlling, heartless. I didn't turn around. That night, I was added to a group chat I'd never agreed to be in. Message after message painted me as the villain. The woman who couldn't handle honesty. The one who trapped a man too young to settle down. I muted the chat, but not before screenshotting everything. Sunday night, James tried again. I talked to my parents, he texted. They think we should try counseling. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. Adults don't need their parents to referee their relationships. And there's nothing to work through. I never said I wanted freedom, he wrote. I just wanted us to have more fun together. After agreeing you should have fun without me, I replied. That told me everything I needed to know. I sent one final message. Thursday. Don't make me get the landlord involved. I set my phone down, hands steady. For the first time since this started, I wasn't angry. I wasn't doubting myself. I was done. By Sunday morning, the story had already been rewritten. Not by me, by everyone else. I woke up to silence on my end, and noise everywhere else. My phone didn't buzz with James's name anymore. Instead, it filled with notifications I hadn't asked for. Mentions, messages, screenshots sent by people who just wanted me to know what was being said. Apparently, I was the villain now. It started with the group chat, the one I'd been added to without consent. A collection of his friends, some I barely knew, others I'd spent holidays with, suddenly united by a shared conclusion. I was cold, unreasonable, controlling, the woman who couldn't handle honesty and punished a man for wanting to live. Someone wrote that James had dodged a bullet. Another said I'd been suffocating him for years. One message in particular stuck with me. Imagine breaking off an engagement over one drunk comment. I read it twice. Then I muted the chat. I didn't leave. I didn't announce my exit. I just muted it and kept living my life. But before I did, I saved everything. Every message, every accusation. Not because I planned to use them, but because I was done letting people rewrite reality without receipts. By Sunday afternoon, the narrative had spilled onto social media. James posted nothing himself. That surprised me less than it should have. He'd never liked confrontation when it couldn't be softened or redirected. His friends, however, had no such restraint. Vague posts appeared, quotes about freedom, about strong men being held back by the wrong women, about how some people mistake boundaries for control. Names weren't mentioned, but the implication was obvious to anyone who knew us. I didn't respond. I cleaned the apartment instead. I rearranged the bookshelf, took down the photos we'd never gotten around to framing, folded the throw blanket the way I liked it, not the way he always insisted looked more casual. Small, quiet acts of reclaiming space. That night, James texted again. My parents want to talk to you, he wrote. They think this has gone too far. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. You involved them, not me. A few minutes passed. They're worried about us, he added. About you. That one almost made me laugh. Before I could respond, my phone rang. His mother. I hesitated, then I answered. Her voice was calm, measured, the kind of calm that carries judgment beneath it. She talked about mistakes, about young people saying things they don't mean, about how 4 years shouldn't be erased by one bad night and the influence of friends. "He loves you," she said. "You know that." "Then he should have acted like it," I replied. There was a pause on the line, the kind that meant she hadn't expected resistance. "You're being very harsh," she said finally. "People change. Relationships require compromise." "I wasn't asked to compromise," I said evenly. "I was laughed at, and he agreed." Another pause. She sighed. "I hope you reconsider. This feels extreme." "It feels final," I said, "and that's intentional." When I hung up, my hands were steady. What unsettled me wasn't the pressure. It was how quickly everyone had agreed on a version of events that required me to be unreasonable for James to be innocent. No one asked what he'd said. No one asked why I was hurt. They just needed a villain to keep the story simple. By Monday morning, even that began to crack. A mutual friend texted me quietly. "I didn't want to get involved," the message read, "but I saw the posts. That's not what happened, is it?" I typed back the truth, briefly, without embellishment. A few minutes later, another message arrived. "That's not how it's being told." I set the phone down and exhaled. Let them talk. I wasn't here to defend myself anymore. The people who mattered would eventually see through it. And the ones who didn't? They were never on my side to begin with. Thursday arrived without drama. No countdown, no final warning, just a date on the calendar that I'd already accepted as real. When I came home from work that evening, the apartment looked the same at first glance. Same couch, same entryway table, same quiet. But the air felt different, charged, like a storm that had already decided where it would land. James was there, not alone. His parents' car was parked outside. So was a U-Haul. One of his friends stood near the truck, arms crossed, jaw tight, like he'd already chosen a side. The friend who'd been loudest since the beginning was there too, pacing, phone in hand, narrating the scene to someone who wasn't present. I unlocked the door and stepped inside without greeting anyone. His father cleared his throat. "Naomi, let's talk about this reasonably." I turned to face him. "There's nothing to discuss. He's here to get his things." "You're making a mistake," his mother said softly. "He loves you." "He loves the idea of me," I replied. "That's not the same thing." James stood near the bedroom doorway, eyes red, shoulders tense. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not broken, just caught between consequences and regret. "This didn't have to be like this," he said. "It did," I answered, "because you made it that way." They started loading boxes. Clothes first. Shoes. The gaming console he'd bought with his own money. Things I didn't argue over. I stayed in the living room, arms folded, watching quietly. Not to be cruel, but to be clear. Nothing left that wasn't his. At one point, his mother gestured toward the dining table. "What about the venue deposit?" she asked. "We lose $2,000 because of this." "You lose it because your son didn't know how to keep his relationship out of his friend's entertainment," I said. "I paid that deposit." Silence followed. James tried again, while carrying a box toward the door. "I can't believe you're really doing this." "I can't believe you thought I'd stay," I replied. The friend finally snapped. "You know what?" she said loudly. "You are boring. He deserves someone who actually wants to live." I looked at her then, really looked. "And you," I said calmly, "can't stand seeing anyone else build something you keep breaking, so you sabotage it instead." Her face flushed. "That's not—" "Load the truck," I said, turning away. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of boxes, of whispered arguments, of heavy silences. When the last box was loaded, James stood in the doorway one final time. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes it worse." They left just after sunset. At 8:03 p.m., the locksmith arrived. By 8:20, the locks were changed. I closed the door behind him, leaned my back against it, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for weeks. The apartment was quiet again. But this time it was mine. The quiet didn't last. It never does. For the first few days after Thursday, everything went eerily still. No texts, no calls, no new posts dragging my name through vague captions and inspirational quotes. I almost let myself believe it was over, that everyone had finally accepted reality and moved on. I should have known better. The first crack came Monday morning in the form of a phone call from my landlord. "Hey, Naomi," he said, casual but cautious. "Just wanted to double-check something. Someone called asking about being added to your lease." My grip tightened around the phone. "Who?" "James, or your fiancé, I guess?" "My fiancé." The word felt outdated, incorrect. "He's not my fiancé anymore," I said, "and he hasn't lived here for over a week." That's what I figured, the landlord replied. He was pretty insistent there'd been a misunderstanding. There wasn't. All right, he said. Just wanted to confirm. He also asked if you'd moved. I laughed once, short and humorless. Why would I move out of my own apartment? That's what I thought, he said. I'll note it. When I hung up, something cold settled in my chest. He wasn't trying to fix things. He was trying to undo them. The next day, I came home to find a note taped to my door. Not from James, from his friend. We need to talk about the things you stole from him. Call me, or I'm calling the cops. I stared at the paper for a long moment, then peeled it off and snapped a photo. Stole. I documented the entire move out. Photos, videos, timestamps. Every box that left my apartment had been accounted for. I texted the number listed on the note. I didn't steal anything. He took all his belongings. Don't contact me again. The reply came almost immediately. The TV was half his. The TV I'd bought 3 years before James moved in. No, I wrote back, it wasn't. And the bedroom furniture. Furniture that had been in my family long before James. Last warning, I typed, do not contact me again. I blocked the number. On Wednesday, James escalated. He showed up at my workplace. Security called me down to the lobby. I knew it was him before they even said his name. I could feel it, like a pressure change before a storm. He looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, unshaven, the kind of disarray designed to inspire guilt. We need to talk, he said as soon as he saw me. No, I replied. You need to leave. You blocked me. Yes. That wasn't fair. That was intentional. He stepped closer. I'm not leaving until you listen. The security guard shifted, uncertain. Ma'am, you know him? My ex-fiancé, I said clearly. We broke up weeks ago. He's not welcome here. James's voice broke. How can you be this cold, after everything we had? I wasn't cold when you laughed, I said quietly. I wasn't cold when you agreed I was boring. I was paying attention. I was wrong, he said quickly. I see it now. Seeing it doesn't undo it. I turned to the guard. Please escort him out. As they led him away, he shouted that I was ruining his life, that I didn't care, that I'd made a mistake I'd regret. I watched the doors close behind him without responding. That night, his mother tried again, this time through my mother. Big mistake. My mom called me afterward, voice sharp with restrained fury. She thinks you're being unreasonable, my mother said, that you should take him back. And what did you say? I asked. I said my daughter doesn't owe anyone forgiveness after being disrespected, she replied, and that you deserve better than a man who needs his friend's approval more than he values his partner. I smiled for the first time in days. Friday brought the final escalation. A letter from a lawyer. James was demanding money, thousands of dollars. Reimbursement for household contributions, half the value of furniture that wasn't his. Emotional damages for the wrongful termination of engagement. I read it twice, just to be sure. Then I laughed. On Saturday morning, I called my cousin, who happened to be a lawyer. I emailed her the letter. She called me back less than an hour later, laughing so hard she had to stop herself. This is ridiculous, she said. He has no case. None. Relief washed over me, slow and steady. Let me handle it, she added. Pro bono, because honestly, this is insulting. Her response letter was surgical. Calm. Devastating. By Sunday, everything went quiet again. This time it felt different, like the story had finally run out of edits. Not all at once, not dramatically, just one ordinary day after another. Exactly the kind of days James and his friends had decided were a problem. The first week was quiet in a way that felt earned. No messages slipping through from new numbers. No posts aimed vaguely in my direction. No friends of friends just checking in. My cousin's letter had done its job. Reality, once introduced, had a way of shutting things down. The apartment changed before I did. I moved the couch back to where I'd always wanted it, gave the bookshelf space to breathe, took down the one print he'd insisted was edgy and replaced it with something softer. I bought a new lamp, rearranged the kitchen drawers. Small things, but intentional. Mine. Work picked up. In a good way. I hadn't realized how much mental space the relationship drama had been taking until it was gone. I focused better, spoke more clearly in meetings, took on a project I'd been putting off because it required attention I hadn't had to spare. 2 weeks later, my manager pulled me aside. There was a promotion coming, not guaranteed, but likely. I would have smiled politely in the past and worried about jinxing it. This time I just nodded. Calm, grounded. My routine came back too. Sunday brunch, farmer's market, quiet evenings with a book instead of a phone buzzing with tension. I slept better than I had in months. No more wondering if I was being compared to some imaginary, more exciting version of myself. No more defending why stability mattered to me. James didn't reach out again. I heard through mutual friends that his social media had gone private, that he'd been posting vague quotes about regret and lessons learned, that his friend group had fractured. Turns out people who thrive on drama eventually turn on each other. I wasn't surprised. One night, a mutual friend texted me, "Just wanted you to know, people are starting to see it. The way things really were. You did the right thing." I stared at the message for a moment, then set my phone down. Validation felt nice, but I didn't need it anymore. Did I miss him? Sometimes. I missed the version of him I thought I was building a life with, the man who once felt steady. But I didn't miss feeling like I wasn't enough, didn't miss being the thing someone had to apologize for wanting. The ring money went back into my savings. The venue deposit stayed gone. An expensive lesson, maybe, but cheaper than a lifetime of shrinking myself to fit someone else's narrative. Here's what I learned. When someone laughs along while others belittle your life together, that isn't a joke, it's information. When they need their friends' approval more than they value your partnership, that isn't a phase, it's a choice. I wasn't boring. Our life wasn't boring. It was peaceful, and he mistook peace for a problem. I don't. The apartment is quiet tonight. The good kind of quiet. The kind that doesn't ask you to explain yourself. I'm good. Really.